Good afternoon and welcome to DDD, Developer. We have with us Andy Dawson, who's going to talk to us about...
Well, hang on, let me do the opening slides first. I'm going to be talking about creating a published intranet in SharePoint Online and then turning that into an app in Teams. And this is very much a low-code, no-code solution designed to be simple. You know, I'm not a developer, so this is the sort of stuff that I can deal with. But anyway, we'll do a few opening slides first. So welcome everybody. It's great that you know, we've got a lot of people attending developer today. Shame it has to be virtual, but there we go. At least we've managed to get this up and running. We've got a code of conduct, so the link is there. I'm sure that everybody is going to behave themselves and so on, but just be aware if there is any problems, that's the link to go to have a look at the code of conduct and contact some of us if you need to discuss anything. We are making donations to the National Museum of Computing. There's a Just Giving page at that particular location. If you feel like donating, the National Museum of Computing, I'm sure, would be eternally grateful. You know, they seem to be having a hard time of it at the moment. And our sponsors on the slide here have been donating to the National Museum of Computing. So I just want to say thank you to them very, very much. If you are on Twitter, please use these hashtags if you want to tweet about what's going on or look up the sort of tweets that are going out around the event today, either the hashtag DDD 2020 or the Developer Day user account there. Okay, so moving on to the presentation. So I'm going to be talking about building and extending a published intranet in SharePoint Online and then making it available in Teams. My name's Andy Dawson. I'm an MVP in Office Apps and Services. My Twitter handle is there, and the GitHub site that I use is at the bottom. That is going to be where I'll put these slides afterwards. So if you want to look through these, grab the links, that sort of thing, you don't have to scribble them down now. You can just pull the slide deck from GitHub later on. So that GitHub address, which I will show again at the end, is the only thing that you actually really need to note down at the moment. So for what we want to do today, you will need, and this is a bit like a recipe, you'll need an Office 365 tenant. You'll need a development environment. You'll need some of the SharePoint Framework web part samples. You'll need Microsoft Teams with App Studio installed, and to actually be able to deal with some of this, you will need to be an Office 365 administrator. And we'll deal with most of this as we go through. The only thing that I'm not going to cover is how to be an Office 365 admin. If you've got your own tenant, you'll be an admin on that. If you need to experiment or play in your own tenant, perhaps your organization, so you may need to talk to somebody about becoming an Office 365 admin in there if they're going to allow you to do that. So the process that we're going to follow is that we're going to initially create a SharePoint communications site, and we're going to sort of show how easy it is to get that set up as a published intranet. I'm also going to show you very briefly how to swap in a root site collection from another communication site if necessary. There's a particular PowerShell command to use for doing that for a specific circumstance, and I'll talk about that in a moment. We're also then going to look at some of the sample custom web parts that are available to extend the functionality of SharePoint Online, and we're going to actually go through and show the process for compiling one of those and deploying it into SharePoint as well, just to show you, how relatively easy that is. We're then going to package. We're going to create an app in Teams, and then we're going to deploy that through the Teams Admin Center so that it becomes available for everybody within an organization as well. So we've got what I hope is a reasonable story there. So the first thing is a developer tenant. If you don't have an Office 365 tenant, or you want to try this as an isolated tenant, so particularly if you're a bit worried about what you're doing, you're not sure about it, grabbing a developer tenant is a good way of doing this. You can get a developer tenant for free by signing up at the URL on that page. It's a full E5 SKU with 25 users. It's free for about 90 days, but it does auto extend if you use it for development work. So if you actually do deploy apps to it, you'll start getting emails saying we've extended your developer tenant. So, I regularly do this sort of thing on mine, and so I regularly get an email from Microsoft saying, hey, we've extended your tenant because we noticed that you are using it for development work. Now, this is a full E5 SKU. It does include the ability to install Office and therefore Teams and that sort of thing as part of it, but it's not covered by the usual Microsoft SLAs for Office 365. It's a developer tenant. It's low priority for them. Okay, so I wouldn't use this for production, but they're absolutely fantastic for experimentation and trying things in an isolated environment. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show a short video in a moment about editing a SharePoint communications site. So I'm going to set this video going and just talk through it as we go. So we edit the page by clicking the edit button in the top right, and SharePoint then has these sections on the page. So you'll see how easy it is to create a new section by just clicking the plus sign and deciding what type of section that we want. I'm going to pick a dual column here. You'll notice also that we've got the ability to add components into the page by clicking the plus sign within a section and then edit using the little pencil icon how we want things like layouts and configuration of those web parts that are being put on the page. So here I'm using the hero web part and I'm just linking to a series of web pages that I created earlier, and these again are very, very quick and easy to do. We can also do things like change the focus of the photo from there, and so on and so on. You know, you'll see how quick and easy this is to actually create these. We can also do things like link to a page, and rather than use a background on there, we can say we just want to use a solid color if that's particularly what we want. So we don't have to have an image on there if we particularly want to. So I'm going to add a couple of other web parts in here as well. So one of them is just an image, and again you'll see how when you drop the web part on the page, it immediately pops open the right dialog and allows you to go and load that image. I'm also going to drop in, there's a news web part. If you create pages and publish those as news pages, this news web part comes pretty well pre-configured for you to actually just have those show up on the page. That's driven by search, and you know, it really is as easy as that. I then click the republish button, which is where the edit button was, and republish that page. And we now have, you know, what to all intents and purposes is actually sort of quite a nice page available to us. So, you know, you can see it's a nice, easy thing to do to start generating these sites and these pages within this area. So if you've got SharePoint Online and you need a published intranet, I'd urge you to go and have a look at SharePoint in the first instance and just see whether that suits your needs. It may well just actually do everything you need. If you've got an older tenant, so for example, we've been on SharePoint Online for quite a long time. So our tenant, when it was created, didn't have modern pages. We had classic pages only. So our root site collection was a classic team site that we could muck around with a little bit. You can replace that with a new communication site if you want. There's a PowerShell commandlet, invoke SPO site swap, that allows you to take a communication site that you've created and configured and swap that into your root site collection. Okay, so the process is you create a new communication site on a different URL. You then install the SharePoint Online Management Shell module. That used to be a separate download, and now it's actually available from the PowerShell gallery. And then you run that command at the bottom, the invoke SPO site swap. You give it a source URL, a target URL, and an archive URL. And it takes the root site collection that you have at the moment, migrates that out to the archive URL, and takes your source URL, the new communication site, and puts that in as your root site collection. Okay, so that's a really easy way of dealing with that particular problem. That actually works very well. I've done that a few times. It can take a few minutes. It usually looks like it only takes a few seconds to do, but it can take a little while for everything to catch up behind the scenes. So if you do it, try and access the page and get some sort of error. Just give it a couple of minutes and everything will sort itself out. That for me has been completely robust and reliable. Okay, but what about additional functionality? So we've created a page, but maybe the out-of-the-box web parts don't cover everything that we want to add to our SharePoint page. Well, the first thing we can try is adding an app from the store. There's a bunch of these available to us already. And to do that, you go into the cog at the top right-hand corner of the page, you hit add an app. You can then go to the SharePoint store, and that opens up a page which gives us access to lots and lots of apps that are available. You know, there are some free ones, there are plenty of paid ones, and so on. And yeah, you know, if the apps that you get on the page by default don't do it for you, I go and have a look at these in the first instance to see whether actually what you want is covered within here. If it's not, you can always create your own. And there are lots and lots of samples out there. I've done one or two of these for our SharePoint instance, just to cover specific scenarios. Some of them have come from these sample web parts, which I'm going to talk through in just a moment. One I did by creating a base SharePoint framework web part, following some instructions, and then pasting some HTML into it. And it really was that simple. That's given me the web part I need that does everything I need it to, straight away. There are lots of samples, as I mentioned. This SharePoint, the framework SPDev FX web parts location on GitHub has an awful lot of these sample web parts. There's a huge list in here. So this is just a clipping from the page. If you go to the page and then click on samples, you end up looking through what is actually a very long list of web parts. Have a look at each of those. Each of them has its page with a description of what they've got and what they do and so on. And just have a look, have a go and see if any of those are going to work for you. So how do we get hold of those? It's GitHub. You can use git clone either via the command line or GitHub Desktop, something like that. I personally used GitHub Desktop. As soon as I found that made my life a lot easier. As I say, I'm not a developer, so this is not my sort of normal comfort zone. But GitHub Desktop has worked really well for me. The other thing that you can do is if you go into the page for this particular repository, you can literally just download the zip file of the entire repository as well. So if that's an easier thing for you, do that, download the zip and unpack it on your machine somewhere where you know where it is. They really do make life easy for you. So the next thing we need to do is make our tenant ready to deploy applications. I'm not going to go through this in detail because there's a really good set of instructions there. So that URL at the top, which talks about setting up your developer tenant, will go through everything you need to do to get your tenant ready to deploy apps. In a nutshell, we need to create an app catalog site. And again, that page leads you through those, dead quickly and easily. We can optionally create a site collection for testing if we want, or you can use the root site collection, which is what I've done for my particular demonstration today. The other thing that is useful is to find the URL of your SharePoint workbench, okay? And that will be your domain.sharepoint.com/_layouts/workbench.aspx. And that is useful when you want to test your web parts that you're compiling and placing into here that need access to SharePoint. So that one's worth noting as well, because you may want to look at that later. The other thing that we'll need to do is configure our development environment. And again, there's a really good set of instructions for doing this. Follow that lot through and it will tell you how to get everything downloaded, installed and ready. In a nutshell, we need to download Node LTS, that's long-term support, version 10 point whatever the latest is from that particular URL. And as I said, I'm going to take these slides and put them on GitHub later on, so you can download them and click on these links later on. You'll want a code editor if you want to have a look at any of the code in here as well. I use Visual Studio Code. It's free. It works really well. I love it. I think it's a really great thing, and I use it for all sorts of things, dealing with PowerShell and so on. The other thing that you'll need to do from that is there's a command at the bottom there, the npm install one, which installs the required components onto your machine. Now, I've actually done this lot recently in a virtual machine to keep that separate from my main development environment, but I do have this installed on my normal laptop as well. So what this looks like, if I just run another quick video, I have sped this up because this does actually take a little while. So you'll see that I've issued that command at the top to install gulp, yo, and the Microsoft SharePoint generator. And this literally just sort of goes through and downloads everything that's required and installs it in all the right locations for you, so that you can just, literally start your development work, pull down those samples and start playing with them and that sort of thing. Okay, so there we go. Now, near the bottom, you'll see that in green, it says everything looks all right. Okay, so that means that thinks that everything's okay, so that's great. If you don't get that, you need to start looking into it, but hopefully you should. And as you can see, I mean, that was about 3 times its normal speed, so it does take a little while. The other thing that you'll notice is you got a bunch of warnings. Okay, so that's just telling you that there's a variety of unsupported bits and pieces on this particular platform. Again, if you've got that green saying everything is all right, I wouldn't worry about the warnings, certainly not at the moment. All right. Bear with me a moment. So the next thing to do is compile and test a sample app. So that list that we looked at previously, I've just wanted, there's one that I particularly wanted. On the front page of our SharePoint instance, we've got an RSS feed from our blog server. And that's not something that is included in the default apps, or certainly wasn't when I started looking at it. So I picked an app from that list, the React RSS Reader, for this particular thing, and wanted to use that. There are lots and lots available, and the list is being updated frequently, and the applications themselves get updated as well. So periodically, people go back in and update them to the later versions of SharePoint Framework and that sort of thing. So it's worth going and checking periodically. If we unpack what we had, so either git clone that source code down, or we've just unzipped it and then changed directory into our React RSS Reader. So that's in samples and then React RSS Reader. This is what one of these looks like. Okay, there's not a huge amount in there right now. Frankly, I'm not a developer. I don't begin to understand everything that's in here. I can have a bit of a poke and a prod, but frankly, I don't necessarily need to worry too much about this. This has got everything in I need. But if I do choose, I can have a good look. Obviously, we can also look at it in something like Visual Studio Code. Okay, so if you've installed Visual Studio Code and tick the box to say add it, so that you've got it in the context menu, you can right-click a folder, okay, and that will open that in Visual Studio Code. Now, at the moment, if you do that where we are right now, you open Visual Studio Code and give it a few seconds, you'll notice that I've got what is politely described as a sea of red down the right-hand side. This is because we don't actually have all the components required for this solution installed yet. Okay, so we'll go through that in just a moment. But if you open the application, the folder in this particular instance, in Visual Studio Code at this point, don't worry if you see a lot of red. Okay, we're going to deal with that in a moment. If we look back at the page for this particular project, you'll see that down the page there is this section that I love. I thought it was brilliant. The minimal path to awesome, okay, which is clone this repository and issue those two commands. Okay, so we've already done the first one of those. We've downloaded the source code and unpacked it. We've then just got two commands to install. To run. The first one, npm install, will literally look at this this thing that we've got, okay, and we'll install all the right bits to actually produce a full solution for us. Gulp serve is then the thing that actually shows us in a web browser what this is going to look like, and by default this will launch the local SharePoint workbench. You can use the one that we found the URL of a little while ago. If your web part needs access to SharePoint, maybe it needs access to a list or something like that, you'll want to use that one that we found the URL to rather than the local one. For the RSS feed, RSS reader that we've got here, it doesn't need access to SharePoint itself. It's effectively a standalone thing. So I can just use the local one to have a play and configure it, okay? So I'm going to show a video in a moment of these two commands running. Now the npm install one takes a while. Okay, so I'm going to set that one going straight away. Now this is literally scanning through the solution that we've got. So we've changed into this React RSS Reader directory. We've issued the npm install command. Okay, and this is, again, it's sped up about 3 times. So don't worry if this takes a while to do its stuff. Okay, the first time I ran it, I was quite shocked at how much, how long it took to run. Okay, but it does take it a few minutes to run through. I think it's about 3 minutes on this particular instance, whilst it goes away, grabs everything it needs and puts it in the right place within the solution for you. So this is doing a load of the hard work for us. Okay, so you'll notice also we've got a bunch of warnings in here again. It also mentions a set of vulnerabilities down at the bottom. Now, if this is something that you are concerned about, and today I'm not going to worry about those, this is where you probably do want to get a developer involved. Okay, I'm not honestly sure, how much of this I should be worrying about. But certainly, I need to talk to some of our developers to see if I can work out getting rid of some of these vulnerabilities. And it gives you, npm audit fix to fix them, or npm audit for details. So you can at least find a list of details that will tell you where the problems are and so on. But for the purposes of today's demo, I'm not going to worry about those. We're just going to go through. Okay, so that's the npm install. I've cut my video in the wrong place, unfortunately. Bear with me a moment. So let me just let this run again. Right, okay, let me finish that one. Right, so the next video I wanted to show is what happens running gulp serve if you've not completed following those instructions in the setup. Okay, so you'll see here that I ran gulp serve and it's given us the standard problem about the execution policy of PowerShell script, and at which point we need to set execution policy on restricted to do that. Now, I then issued gulp serve again, and we'll see in a moment when it fires up that it fires up the browser. And again, this does take a few moments for it to grind into life and so on, because this is the first time I need to allow access through the firewall. And you'll notice that it's telling me my connection isn't private. There's another step that we've missed here, which is to trust the development certificate. Okay, and again, in that setup, there's a set of instructions near the bottom of the page to do that, and it tells you how to do it. And you can click the advanced button here and go through, and that will take you through, but you should really trust that dev certificate so that you can go straight through. So the two commands for that we need are set execution policy on restricted to allow us to run that PowerShell, and then the gulp trust dev cert. Okay, it will show you a warning about installing the certificate, and you just need to click yes to say yes, you want to install it and therefore trust it. If we then rerun that, you should see this time again it takes it a few moments to grind into life. You'll see it launch the web browser, and this time we go straight into the workbench. This does take a little while, so don't panic about it. If you just get a blank screen, or what looks like a blank screen, we are waiting for SharePoint to grind into life effectively, okay, in the workbench. There we go, it finally gets there. And you'll see we've got what looks like a basic SharePoint page. Okay, if we click that add new web part, we can then see our new RSS Reader web part that we've compiled and dropped into the workbench here. So we can start adding that into the page and start having a play with it. So, as mentioned before, if you're testing a sample that needs access to SharePoint, you can use the online workbench, which is at that URL. Okay, now what that does is that injects that RSS reader, which you can see sort of in over at the right hand side, second one down on the right hand side, into your standard list of SharePoints, because your web parts within SharePoint, because you're now actually operating within SharePoint. We can then add that web part and start configuring it exactly as we would normally, however it is that we want to deal with that. Okay, so that's great. That allows us to see that we've got a web part and that it's working for us, and hopefully it'll do what we want. So the next thing to do is package and deploy that sample app so that we can actually then install it into SharePoint and use it in production. There's a couple more commands we need to run. So gulp bundle -- ship, and then gulp package -- solution -- ship. And the result of those two is that within your solution, underneath the SharePoint solution folder, you'll get a .sppkg file. That's the file that we're going to need to actually drop into SharePoint to be able to deploy this application. So to deploy the application, we navigate to your app catalog file, the one that you created during that preparation phase. We click apps for SharePoint on the left, we drag and drop that file in, and we say we want to trust the solution. Okay, so I have a video showing that. So there's my .sppkg file. That's the output. There's my apps for SharePoint. And you'll notice where that is. I've created it under /site/app catalog. Click into apps for SharePoint, and there's nothing there at the moment. Now, this is a really simple thing. You literally just drag and drop that in. It will upload the file, and it will then launch a dialog and ask you whether you're going to trust it or not. You can also choose to make the solution available to all sites in the organization, so all site collections, if you wish to do so. And that's it. That's really sort of where you are with it. It's a really simple operation to get that working. Okay, so if you now go and edit your page, you'll find that your RSS Reader application that I've been using here has turned up in this list, and it's now deployed for production. We can use it everywhere we want to. Now, do be aware that can take a couple of minutes to come through. When I was doing this, because I was experimenting on a virtual machine, I went really quickly into the page and tried to add it, and it wasn't there. Gave it a couple of minutes, and it turned up. So yeah, it can just take a minute or two to come through. So we click the RSS Reader, that deploys it, and we can then configure our app. We've got the little pencil icon for editing things, and we've got the options in that panel on the right hand side, and we can configure that up. And that works very well, that's great. Okay, so we've now extended SharePoint a little bit, and there are, as I said, there are loads of those sample apps that you can go away and have a go with, get them compiled up and have a play. Start on a developer tenant if you can, you know, and have a look and see what they look like on there. So the next thing I want to do is take our published web page that we've got there, published SharePoint page, and actually have it as an app inside Teams as well. So we've got a couple of prep steps for this. Well, I say a couple, it's one. So inside your Teams app, once you've got signed in, we need to install App Studio, and that really is it. There really is nothing else to do on there. So you click the ellipsis down at the bottom left-hand side, enter App Studio, and click that. It will ask you whether that is something that you want to add. You just hit the add button, and that will go ahead and add App Studio into Teams for you. So to create an app in App Studio to do what we want, this is the process that we're going to go through. We start the Teams App Studio. We want to select Manifest Editor and create a new app and fill in some app details, add logos, that sort of thing. We're going to select a tab, which may sound a bit daft if we're going to want to use this over at the left-hand side eventually as well. But this is how we do the development for this particular thing. We add a personal tab and complete all the details. We ensure the permissions are correct in the domains and permissions, and then we can test and distribute that and just start seeing what it looks like. Okay, so here we are. We've clicked into App Studio. So we'll use this Create a New App button over at the left-hand side. This gives us a page that asks us for a series of app details. So we need to give it a short name and a long name. We need to give it an identification number, and you'll notice there's a generate button there, which allows us to automatically generate a GUID for that. We also need to give it a package name, version, and so on and so on. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I've used the name W4051 SharePoint, that's the tenant that I'm using, and the full name needs to be a bit different from that as well. Okay, by the time you get to the end, if you're going to publish it, if you just copy and paste the short name into the long name and then later on the tab stuff, yeah, it starts getting a bit picky. So just you know, go the extra mile and write something sensible out. I've hit the generate button to generate a GUID there for the ID, and I've just made up a package name. Okay, and I mean you know that's it. It's dead easy to do, and a version, and we give it a description. Down towards the bottom of that page, there are a series of icons that you need. So you need a full color one, a transparent one, and then an accent color. And I've basically taken the standard SharePoint icon and miniaturized that and turned one of them white for the white outline. But in each of these cases, you click the update button, go and select these. You don't have to use anything. There is a basic app which you can app icon which you can see in the middle one of these boxes. You can just use that to start with until you're ready to actually have an icon for it. So don't feel this is a necessary step, but it's a nice one when you are going to put it into production to actually have an icon in there. Okay, so there's mine. I've picked a full color SharePoint one, I've got a white SharePoint one, and then the accent color matches what I'm doing. One other thing that you really should note here is down towards the bottom, it says there's a loading indicator, which it's supposed to show a loading spinner. I'd recommend not using this because certainly for the app type that we're creating here, if you have the loading indicator, the page never loads. Okay, so don't use that, but you can use full screen mode if you want, and that strips out some of the SharePoint background navigation and that sort of thing. We then click down into tabs, okay, and we add a personal tab by clicking on the add button, the bottom of those two add buttons. This one's relatively simple. We need to give it a name and an entity ID, and the entity ID can be a number, it can be letters, it can be whatever you want, so something sensible in there. The content URL you then have, you can see you've got a special URL there where it has the Teams logon to ASPX and a query parameter SPFX equals true and whatever the destination is. So this is saying essentially, please take me off, single sign me into Teams, into SharePoint rather, from Teams, and then return me to that particular destination. So you can use this for any page. The URL is in the presentation. I'll make sure that, as I say, that this is uploaded so that the people can get at it. This is the sort of format that you follow to do that one. Okay, and at the end of that process, once you've added that tab, this is what you get down towards the bottom. You've got a new tab there that's been created. We then need to look at the valid domains, the domains and permissions area, and generally this actually fills itself in pretty much, other than I think the one at the bottom. Okay, so it will pick the domains from the tabs that you've created based on the URLs that you've entered earlier. Down at the bottom, you've got a single sign-on. You can specify the resource URL of the app requiring the auth token for SSO, and I tend to put the SharePoint root site collection in there, or the site collection, the one that you were using, and you know, just make sure that that's been added. We then look at the test and distribute page, and assuming this comes up and gives you all the options and doesn't give you any errors, you can then click the install button to go ahead and install it into Teams and have a look and see what it looks like. Okay. If you get this error where it says permissions needed, it means that you've not turned on custom application support within Microsoft Teams. Okay, and you need to talk to whoever manages Teams, or if it's in your developer tenant, if you go into the Teams admin center, so admin.teams.microsoft.com, okay, and then go down to Teams apps and then setup policies, and just flick that upload custom apps slider across. Again, this takes just a few minutes for everything to kick into life and allow you to install this as a separate app. But once that happens, when you go ahead and try it, you find that you've not got the error anymore. Now, in fact, I sped this process up. I signed out of Teams and then signed back in again in this particular instance to speed up the process. So if you then click that add button, you'll find that this app gets installed for you as an individual user over at the left-hand side of Teams, and you'll see I have that application W4051 SharePoint installed over at the left-hand side. But at this point, this is only for me. This is my user, and it doesn't appear for anybody else. Okay, so how do we take this app that I've developed for just me and make it available to the organization as a whole? So what we actually do is we go back to our test and distribute page, download it, and then we upload it into the Teams admin center and use a setup policy to automatically pin it for all of the users that we have within the organization. So if we look back at our test and distribute page, you'll notice that you've actually got a download button in the middle. And if you click that, what you get is what's shown in the bottom right-hand corner, where it says it successfully exported the package, and it sticks it in your default download folder. So, you know, dead easy. If we then return to our Teams admin center, click into Teams apps and manage apps, okay, we can upload an app into our Teams instance to allow us to use this app. So you click the upload button over here in the middle left. You then can select a file in the way that you normally would. You literally just go to that downloaded package, select it, and then click upload, and that will then appear. You'll see I've got a green bar across the top of this page, so that indicates that was successfully added in. Okay, and we can then search for it within our list of apps. So to do something with it, we now need to apply an app setup policy. So if we come down to Teams apps and then setup policies again, you may have more setup policies than I have in here, but the one that I'm using is the global, the org-wide default. For this particular instance, I've not assigned any other setup policies, but these are a great way of distributing apps to different groups of people. So you can have multiple setup policies for multiple groups within the organization, and you can give them different apps. So for example, if you've got an HR area that you wanted to create the same sort of app, taking users in HR straight into their HR area of SharePoint, you could create an HR setup policy, create the app for them, and then pin just that HR one within that area. You assign that policy to those members of HR, and yeah, they'll get that, whereas IT or something like that will get their version instead. So if you select that app setup policy, so I've selected the global one, you'll see lower down the page that you've got these pinned apps, and you can see there that this list matches what you get in Teams by default. Okay, so I can click the add an app. I can then search for my W4051 SharePoint in this particular instance, and then hit the add button. And that ends up then at the bottom of the list. Again, if you give this a little while and you're waiting for the policies to refresh out to all of your users, this will appear for everybody that policy is assigned to. So the global one, the organization-wide one, will eventually get everybody who doesn't have another higher priority policy assigned to them. Okay, and what that then looks like is this app gets pinned at the bottom of that list by default. Clicking on it opens that SharePoint page, and we can navigate around and do whatever we need to. And because we included that specific URL for the single sign-on, Teams signs us into SharePoint automatically with the current user, which makes life really, really easy. The only downside I've found from this particular thing is that if you go into this and navigate your way through SharePoint, there's no state written. So if you then come out of it into another part of Teams and come back in, it will drop you back to the start page again, unfortunately. So you can't flick in and out of it terribly easily. But if you want people to access your published intranet to read the news stories and that sort of thing, this is a really great way of just getting them in from within Teams, so they don't have to go and launch a browser and go to SharePoint. They can just get everything they need from within Teams. Now, the other thing that I found very interesting was that reading the documentation, it says that only modern sites work with this. And in fact, that's not actually true. Classic sites also work using this method, and some websites as well. Now, you've got to have an HTTPS website. Not everything I've tried works. Essentially, I mean, I've tried one or two things. I'll show you one of those in a moment. But there's a classic team site I created and literally went through the same steps. And as you can see, a classic team site is injected into there quite happily as well. So despite what it says about only supporting modern sites, we can use classic sites in there as well if we want to. I also took the Black Marble website and ran that through exactly the same treatment. We had I tried with a few other websites. So I tried with my personal website, and that's not HTTPS. And then I tried with something like the BBC News website, and that didn't want to work. This one's running on Azure. It's running on PaaS on Azure, and that may be the deciding factor. But it's certainly worth a go. If you've got your corporate website that you want, to give people access to, it's certainly worth trying this, because it just literally takes a few minutes to do. Okay, so to recap, we've seen briefly how to create a published intranet in SharePoint Online. We've added some additional functionality using a web part, just using some of the samples that are available. We've also then created an app in Teams to show this published intranet in Teams, and then pinned that app using one of those policies to the sidebar to make it available to everybody. So I hope that's been useful and interesting. As I say, these are my details. I'll leave this up for the moment. That GitHub location is where I will be uploading this slide deck in a little while. So rather than having to worry about the URLs, you can just go there and collect that. And I think essentially at this point, if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to answer those. So Ryan, I don't know whether we have any questions at the moment.
So it helps if I unmute myself. So it doesn't look like we've had any questions come in the Q&A.
Fair enough. Okay.
Right. With that, thank you for that session, Andy. It was really, really good. And I will end the meeting.
Cool. Thank you very much.